The Obsidian Hotel's private dining room was suffocating. Adrian Kessler sat at the head of the marble table, his tailored charcoal suit somehow darker than the fury in his eyes. Around him, Chicago's most dangerous men held their breath. They all knew what this meeting was about. The Russians were making a move, and if Kessler lost control of the Miami ports, the entire criminal hierarchy would collapse. The doors opened. Everyone turned. Adrian's hand froze halfway to his whiskey glass. His jaw locked. For the first time in 10 years, since he'd taken control of the Kessler syndicate at 19 years old, nobody had ever seen Adrian Kessler shocked. She walked in like she owned the room. The woman wore a sapphire gown that seemed to shimmer with its own light, each step calculated, deliberate, dangerous. Her hair fell in luxurious waves down her back. Her eyes, sharp, lethal, aristocratic, swept across the room with the precision of someone assessing exits, guard positions, and threat levels. That's not. Lucien Dante, Adrian's most trusted enforcer, couldn't even finish the sentence. Adrian stood up. His voice came out like gravel. "Who the hell are you?" "Your date, Adrian," she said, her voice deeper than before, layered with an accent he'd never heard. She moved past him with absolute confidence, not waiting for his arm or his permission. "Shall we begin?" Anton Petrov, the Russian Bratva captain sitting across the table, went pale. One of Petrov's men reached for something concealed. Lucien moved. 2 guns appeared in the hands of Adrian's security in under a second. But none of them mattered. Because as the sapphire gown caught the light, every single person in that room recognized the symbol hanging from a delicate chain around her neck, a rose wreathed in thorns. The Deluca family crest. "No," Petrov whispered. "That's impossible. She's dead. They're all dead." Adrian turned to look at her, really look at her, and something shifted in his expression. Not confusion anymore. Recognition. Fury. And underneath it all, something darker, the understanding that he'd been played for 18 months by a ghost. "Sit," she said, not to Adrian, to Petrov. Her tone made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. Petrov sat. Adrian slowly lowered himself back into his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't put a bullet in your skull right now." She smiled, not warmly, like a predator that had just revealed its teeth. "Because you need me more than you've ever needed anyone in your life, and in about 60 seconds you're going to understand why." The camera pulls back, showing the entire room in suspended animation. 12 armed men, 2 Russian mobsters, and 1 woman who just changed everything. If you're watching this right now, drop in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see this story reach everywhere, because what happens next, it's absolutely insane. 3 weeks earlier, Adrian Kessler sat in his penthouse office on the 42nd floor of Kessler Tower, staring at intelligence reports that made no sense. The Russians were supposed to be content. They had their peace. They'd agreed to stay in their lane. The truce had been solid for 2 years. Until yesterday. Anton Petrov had arrived in Chicago unannounced. Not with a phone call, not with a messenger. He'd shown up at one of Adrian's legitimate businesses, Kessler Holdings, and made his presence known. That was a power move. That was a threat. "We need more." That's what Petrov had said before Adrian's security escorted him out. "We're tired of 30%. We want 45. 45% of Miami's ports. That wasn't a negotiation. That was a declaration of war." Adrian had maybe 72 hours to stop it. His secretary knocked softly on the door. She always knocked softly. She did everything softly, moved softly, spoke softly, existed softly. Adrian had hired her for exactly that reason. In his world, you needed people who could disappear into the background, people who wouldn't attract attention, people who wouldn't ask questions. Seraphine Hayes had been perfect for 18 months. She walked in wearing an oversized beige blazer and thick-framed glasses that made her look perpetually confused. Her hair was pulled back severely, no makeup, just invisible. "You have the Chicago PD files," Adrian didn't even look up, "on your desk, and the Miami Port Authority contact information." She set down a folder and a handwritten note. Her voice was flat, efficient, emotionless. "Also, Vivienne called, something about the charity gala. I told her you'd call her back." "Good." Adrian finally glanced at her, just for a second. "We need to reschedule the Midwest acquisition meeting. Move it to next month." "It's tomorrow." "I know when it is." Adrian's tone suggested that contradicting him was a mistake she'd only make once. "Move it." Seraphine nodded and turned to leave. "Wait," Adrian's voice stopped her. "I need you to do something for me." She turned back. "Sir, we have a situation with the Russians. Petrov is making a play for more territory. I'm meeting with him in New Orleans at the Onyx on Friday. Neutral ground. He's bringing his fiancée to make it look like a social dinner." Seraphine's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, subtle, like a lock clicking into place. "You need me to handle logistics. I need you to come with me, as my date." Seraphine blinked, twice. That was the most emotion Adrian had ever seen from her. "Sir, I'm not. That's not my role. I handle scheduling. I'm not equipped for." "I don't care," Adrian interrupted. "Vivienne is a liability. She can't keep her mouth shut. The Russians will use anything she says as leverage. I need someone I trust, someone discreet, someone who doesn't talk." "But my appearance—" Adrian pulled out his black Centurion card, the unlimited card. The card that meant cost was completely irrelevant. He slid it across his desk toward her. "Buy a dress. A nice one. Get your hair done. Make yourself presentable. We leave Thursday afternoon." Seraphine stared at the card like it might bite her. "Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." She picked up the card with trembling fingers, actual trembling. Adrian noticed. "I'll be ready." She left his office, and Adrian returned to the intelligence reports. He had no idea that he'd just made the most critical decision of his life. "Before we continue, I have a question for you. If you were Adrian, powerful, ruthless, controlling everything around you, and you discovered that someone you'd trusted completely had been lying to you for 18 months, what would you do?" Comment below, because the answer Adrian makes is completely different from what any of us would expect. The boutique was called Belles et Noires, and it existed in that space between luxury and absolute excess. The kind of place where a single dress cost more than most people made in a year. Seraphine walked in wearing her secretary uniform and was immediately dismissed by every staff member in the store. One woman literally pointed toward the exit, assuming she was lost. "The regular mall is that way, dear." Seraphine pulled out Adrian's black Centurion card. The entire dynamic shifted in 3 seconds. A manager appeared, the manager, immediately apologizing, immediately fawning, immediately terrified of losing this client. "Ms.," she asked, desperate to know whose assistant she was looking at. "Seraphine," she slid the card across the counter. "I need a gown, something that commands a room." The manager's eyes widened. That was a specific request. That was a power play. "Of course, let me show you our most exclusive collection." They brought dresses, dozens of them, black on black, champagne, sapphire, emerald, all beautiful, all expensive, all forgettable. Seraphine walked past all of them and stopped at a gown in the back of the collection. The sapphire silk was almost blue, almost green, shimmering with a kind of dangerous beauty that seemed to pulse with its own energy. "That one," she said quietly. The manager hesitated. That's quite bold, very striking. It's unconventional for most clients." Seraphine's eyes went cold. "Sapphire was my family's color, my real family." Something in her tone made the manager not ask any follow-up questions. 2 hours later, Seraphine emerged from the dressing room and every person in the boutique froze. The stylist had removed her glasses first. Her eyes were revealed, sharp, intelligent, aristocratic features that had been completely hidden beneath her secretary persona. Her mousy brown hair had been transformed into luxurious waves that framed her face like they'd been waiting 18 months for this moment. The makeup was subtle but lethal, smoky eyes that suggested danger, crimson lips that suggested power, cheekbones highlighted in a way that made her look like old money and older secrets. The sapphire gown fit her like it had been made specifically for this moment, for this body, for this woman. The stylist actually stepped back. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so transformed. Seraphine stared at herself in the mirror. Not at her beauty. She already knew she was beautiful. She stared at the dangerous woman looking back at her. The predator that had been waiting underneath the mouse costume for 18 months. She reached for the sapphire pendant that she'd brought with her, the only thing she'd kept from her real life. She fastened it around her throat, and the rose wreathed in thorns caught the light like it was made for this exact moment. "Welcome back," she whispered to her reflection. "Seraphine Deluca." Friday evening, the Onyx dining room in New Orleans. Adrian waited in the private room, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than a luxury car. He was reviewing the meeting with Petrov in his mind, the angles, the leverage points, the ways this could go wrong. Lucien stood beside him, scanning the room one more time for security issues. "Your date's arriving," Lucien said into his earpiece. Adrian nodded, still thinking about Petrov, still planning, still in complete control. The door opened. Lucien's jaw went slack. Adrian's thoughts completely stopped functioning. The woman who walked into the room was not his secretary. She moved like she'd been doing this her entire life, every step calculated, every gesture deliberate. The sapphire gown moved against her skin like liquid silk. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves that seemed to have their own gravity. But it was her eyes that made Adrian's blood go cold. She looked at him, and he saw something he'd never seen before, a lethal intelligence that made every single person in this room immediately register her as dangerous. Adrian stood. He was supposed to be in control. He was supposed to be unflappable. Instead, his voice came out rough. "Who the hell are you?" She smiled, just slightly, like she'd been waiting 18 months for this exact question. "Your associate, Adrian, shall we begin?" She didn't wait for his answer. She walked past him with absolute confidence and entered the private dining room like she owned it. Anton Petrov was already seated, his fiancée Natasha beside him. When he saw Seraphine, his face went white. "Adrian," Petrov said slowly, carefully, like he was speaking a language he didn't fully understand. "Who is this?" Seraphine sat down across from Natasha without waiting to be seated. She smiled at the younger woman, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone assessing prey. "That bracelet is beautiful," Seraphine said softly. "Heroin or fentanyl?" Natasha's face went pale. Adrian's eyes snapped toward Seraphine. What the hell was she doing? "I'm just curious," Seraphine continued, her voice like ice water. 30 grams of high-grade fentanyl in your bloodstream. I can tell by the track marks on your wrists, the way your pupils are dilated, the slight tremor in your hands. When Anton discovers this, and he'll kill you. Then he'll kill himself. The Russian codes are very specific about these things." Natasha started shaking. Petrov stood up, his hand moving toward a concealed weapon. "You need to stop talking right now." Seraphine switched languages. She spoke Russian, but not the Russian that tourists learn, not the Russian that most people know. She spoke the harsh, guttural dialect of the Bratva inner circle, the language that only the highest-ranking members ever heard, much less used. "I know your protocols, Petrov. I know your codes. I know exactly what you're planning to do." Her Russian was perfect, unaccented, lethal. And you're going to stand down. The ports remain at 30%. You'll accept 25% as a compromise, or I'll expose Natasha's addiction to every Bratva captain from Moscow to Vladivostok. Do you understand me?" Petrov froze, his hand dropped. Seraphine continued in English, her voice returning to its sharp, controlled tone. "You're also going to inform your superiors that Adrian Kessler is untouchable, that anything they do to him, anything they plan against him, will result in consequences they can't even imagine. Are we clear?" "Who are you?" Petrov whispered. Seraphine stood up. She reached down and unfastened the sapphire pendant from around her neck. She placed it gently on the table in front of Petrov. The rose, wreathed in thorns, seemed to glow in the candlelight. "My real name is Seraphine Deluca, the last heir to the Deluca crime family. 3 years ago, Salvatore Rixai and his cartel slaughtered everyone I loved, my parents, my siblings, my cousins, everyone except me." Adrian felt the world shift underneath him. "I've been hiding for 18 months as Adrian's invisible secretary. I needed protection. I needed to be someone nobody would ever think to look for, nobody would ever recognize. And I needed to assess whether Adrian Kessler was strong enough to stand beside me when the time came." She looked directly at Adrian. "He is." The drive back to Chicago was silent. Adrian stared out the window of the Maybach, his mind spiraling through the implications. His secretary, his invisible, quiet, perfect secretary, had been lying to him for 18 months. She wasn't just his employee. She was the last heir to a dead crime family. She was a threat. She was an asset. She was something he couldn't even properly categorize. They arrived at his penthouse at 2 a.m. Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. He handed her a glass and studied her face. "You've had 18 months to kill me if you wanted to, so I'm guessing you don't, which means you want something else." "I wanted to survive," Seraphine said quietly. "My family is dead. The man who killed them, Salvatore Rix, he's still looking for me. So are his allies. So are the Russians who would use me as leverage against Adrian's empire. Working for you, being invisible, that was survival. And now everyone will know. Within hours, every faction in this city will know the Deluca heir is alive. That changes everything." Adrian walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. He entered the code and the safe clicked open. Inside was a single velvet box. He removed it and walked back to her. "Your identity being exposed is a problem I can't ignore," Adrian said slowly. "But it's not an unsolvable problem. The old world codes, the ones that Petrov respects, that Rixai follows, they have rules. One of those rules is that you don't touch a capo's wife." He opened the box. Inside was a diamond ring, 12 carats, emerald cut, brilliant, deadly. "Marry me," Adrian said, "not a request, a command." Seraphine's eyes widened. That was the first time Adrian had seen her show genuine emotion since she'd revealed herself. "It's not love," Adrian continued. "Don't mistake this for anything it's not. This is strategy. This is protection. This is power consolidation." "Adrian, let me finish." He stepped closer. "You're done hiding. You stand beside me openly as my partner, my equal, my queen. Every faction from Chicago to Miami will understand that the Deluca heir is under Kessler protection. And when they come for Rix, when we destroy him for what he did to your family, they'll come knowing that we're unstoppable together." He took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. "So what do you say?" Seraphine looked at the ring, then at Adrian, and something in her expression shifted. Something that suggested she understood that she wasn't just gaining protection, she was gaining purpose. "Yes," she said simply, "let's destroy him." The announcement hit Wall Street and the criminal underworld simultaneously the next morning. KSSLER announces engagement. Surprise fiancé REVLED as mysterious beauty. Adrian Kessler, the man who had never committed to anyone, had suddenly announced his engagement to a woman nobody had ever seen before. Within hours, the rumors started. Within 12 hours, the truth spread through the underworld like wildfire. The Deluca heir was alive. She was engaged to Adrian Kessler. And she was coming out of hiding. The charity gala at the Obsidian Hotel was supposed to be a minor social event. It became the most important night in Chicago's underworld in 3 years. Seraphine arrived in a black velvet gown that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A diamond choker that had been in her family for generations rested against her throat. She moved through the crowd with absolute authority, standing beside Adrian like they'd been ruling together forever. Salvatore Rixey arrived at 10 p.m. When he saw her, his face went absolutely white. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Adrian felt Seraphine tense beside him, just slightly, just enough that he knew. She was looking at the man who'd murdered her entire family, and she was planning exactly how she was going to make him pay. "He's going to have to die," Seraphine whispered. Adrian nodded. "I know. I'm going to kill him myself." Adrian squeezed her hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Rixey tried to leave. He made it 5 steps before Adrian's men blocked his exit. Rixey reached for his gun. Adrian's men reacted faster. Shots erupted through the ballroom. Chaos exploded. But in the center of that chaos, Seraphine moved with lethal grace. She took out 3 of Rixey's men without even breathing hard. She moved like she'd been trained her entire life for exactly this: violence, danger, the art of staying alive when everything wanted you dead. By the time the federal agents burst through the doors, Rixey was already running. He'd lost 30 men. He'd lost leverage. And he'd lost the one thing that mattered. He discovered that his enemy was no longer hiding. Adrian and Seraphine escaped through the kitchen to the waiting armored SUV. Seraphine's gown was stained with blood that wasn't hers. Adrian looked at her as they drove through the streets of Chicago toward his penthouse. "You saved my life back there," he said quietly. "You gave me my life back," Seraphine replied. "We're even." "No," Adrian said. "We're not even. We'll never be even, because from this moment forward we're not 2 separate people. We're one unit. We're inevitable." He pulled her toward him and kissed her, not gently, but with the intensity of 2 predators recognizing each other as equals for the first time. When they broke apart, Seraphine was smiling. "What happens now?" Adrian looked out at Chicago's skyline, glittering with a million lights. "Now we go to war. Not defensive. Offensive. Salvatore Rixey destroyed your family. We're going to destroy him. We're going to take everything from him, his territory, his allies, his power. And we're going to make sure that every crime family from New York to Los Angeles knows exactly what happens when you touch what belongs to us." "He doesn't have a chance, does he?" Seraphine asked. Adrian turned to look at her. "None. He's already dead. He just doesn't know it yet." Seraphine reached for his hand and squeezed. "Then let's finish what we started." The camera pulls back, showing them together in the darkness of the penthouse, the city lights reflecting off the windows, 2 dangerous people bound together by strategy, survival, and something that might be love, or might be something far more destructive. So here's the final question for you. If you were Seraphine, would you have revealed yourself the way she did? Or would you have stayed hidden, stayed safe, stayed invisible? Comment below, and if you haven't already, smash that like button and subscribe. Because next week we're diving deeper into what happens when Rixey fights back, and spoiler alert, things get absolutely insane. Thank you for watching until the very end. I'll see you in the next one.